In this episode of Kastoshi, I talk to Brian Demind, who's the author of the best-selling book Bitcoin Evangelism. We talk about Bitcoin, inflation, and everything else under the sun in crypto, including his new book where he tries to educate people on Bitcoin in an easy-to-understand way. Please note that Brian is not, I repeat, he is not a Bitcoin maximalist, so he has a very fair view. We also talk about where we see the future of crypto and the world economy, including possible scenarios for the USA to get out of the current inflation and debt cycle. I hope you enjoy this amazing episode. Welcome to Kastoshi, and today we talk to Brian Demind, author of Bitcoin Evangelism. Hi, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, like he said, I don't know if you can see it there. That's my new book, Bitcoin Evangelism. It just cracked in. We released it a month ago, and it's already in the Amazon bestsellers, on the Amazon bestsellers list in the economic inflation category. So that list updates about every hour, and it's been as high as number 22 in the world on all books on economic inflation. So it was pretty cool for me to see it just come out of the gate so strong. But the book is really a case for Bitcoin, first as a technology and then as an investment. My goal is to help people that are coming to this market to first understand just the basic fundamentals of Bitcoin as a technology, as a monetary policy. And then if you're convinced of those things, then what are the implications of it as an investment? And then we do dabble into things like DeFi, like NFTs, what are smart contracts? What are oracles and how do they relate to smart contracts, and all sorts of interesting things like that. But it's really done through the lens of explaining it to the layperson. How does a caveman like me explain it to somebody else that's a caveman, not somebody that's a Google engineer or something like that? So that's kind of the mission right now, and it's gotten quite a bit of success. And like I said, on that Amazon bestsellers list, it's been really cool. It's outperforming some of the books that were my favorite books on inflation, like books that I even quoted in the book, and it's even ahead of those. So it's gotten a lot of support, and which is pretty amazing. Because yes, inflation's a big deal right now. Every country around the world is talking about inflation. So I think that's helping to some degree. But Bitcoin, cryptocurrency right now is not very appealing. We're in a bear market. And so for the fact a Bitcoin book to be doing so well right now is very flattering, to say the least.
Okay, and could you tell us why you're qualified to write the book? And I mean, maybe tell us about your journey. Like, you weren't born with a Bitcoin in your mouth. So how did you get here?
Well, you know what? It's funny. So I wasn't obviously born with a Bitcoin in my mouth because I'm not that young. Couldn't have been because it didn't exist. But I've grown up with a distinct understanding of in our household. We talked about I came from a family of gold bugs. We talked about monetary, sovereignty, having control over your own money. So from a very young age, this was something that was already pre-programmed into me. My last name Demind actually means from the house of coin minters. So somewhere in our family's history, we were like a noble family that was in banking and coin minting. I also grew up,
Was
strangely
your
enough,
first tooth a gold tooth then?
it
You're a
was. I
kid.
had one right here. I lost it. And then this one's my sweet tooth. So yeah, I've got a couple teeth. But and then strangely enough, I grew up on sovereign way. So from a very young age, I remember always asking my parents, what does sovereign mean? And I remember being very aware of this idea of individual sovereignty from a very young age. So anyways, that was what I was born with in my mouth, right? But as far as professionally, I've been an entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 22. I still run that business to this day. So I had been around money and finance and the business and entrepreneur aspect of things. But in 2013, I just became interested in Bitcoin, kind of first as a skeptic. I was very skeptical of it. I believe I came to it after you. I think you were in it quite a bit before I was. But I came to it very skeptically. I had friends that were buying it, and I wanted to study it in order to help explain to them why this magic internet money was just a fraud and a Ponzi scheme and kind of all these general accusations you hear about Bitcoin. But through studying Bitcoin, it forces you to then study monetary policy and then the banking system and then the history of economics. And so what the ultimate conclusion of that is, it's a very compelling case for why Bitcoin matters to the world as money, and then why blockchain matters in terms of decentralizing other aspects of our economy or of commerce in different areas. And beyond commerce. I mean, you can even talk about medical research and educational records and all sorts of different things that you can decentralize. And so through that, in about 2018, I was hired as the chief marketing officer for a little blockchain project called Athenium. And the goal of that project, it's very small. It hasn't gained a lot of traction to this day. I worked on that project for about 3 years. I still believe it's a really noble, kind of cool project. And the aim of that project is to decentralize education and kind of give power back to, one, the educators and content providers, but then also make educational content very inexpensive and accessible for people. A great noble project. But what I was realizing was, in those meetings as the chief marketing officer, we were seeking venture capital. We were seeking investment from big investors, and we'd sit down in a meeting with people that were managing, 100 or $200 million. And we would be, hey, can you invest in this project? Here's what we're doing. And we're pitching this level 4 and 5 complicated blockchain, future of education type stuff to them. And then they're saying, okay, whoa, what is a blockchain? What is Bitcoin even? I've heard of Bitcoin. I know it's a blockchain. And so we were having to go back to foundational ground one things. And these are very sophisticated investors that they didn't even understand blockchain. They didn't even understand the basics and the history of Bitcoin. And so it's like we're trying to run before we crawl. And so I just saw this huge information gap in terms of people's understanding of what blockchain is, why it matters. And so that's why I decided to set out and write my book. At the end of last year, in 2021, I resigned from Athenium just so I could focus full time on writing and my other business.
Okay, could I add something, Nick?
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
I think it's a good point. Yeah, it's too early. Like, a lot of people say to me, people who are not in tech or crypto or anything, and they say, why should I care about crypto? And I say, you shouldn't. It's probably 5 to 10 years before you'll use it. And when you do use it, you probably won't know it's there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's exactly right. And that's one of the, strangely enough, I say that exact thing in my book. And I use the example of the internet. My mom, she was never a technology adopter, right? She wasn't somebody that was forward thinking on technology. But when she turns on her TV and she wants to watch Downtown Abbey or something like that, and she doesn't realize that it's not cable that's streaming that for her anymore. She doesn't realize it's Netflix that's actually bringing that to her. And so she's adopted the internet because it's become integrated in every aspect of life. Like you said, I think that when, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, when Bitcoin or some other blockchain potentially is the payment rail for all money around the world, you might be sending US dollars from you to me, or British pounds, or whatever it happens to be, but we're not going to recognize that it's the Bitcoin payment rails on which it's being sent. And so that's when things have reached mainstream adoption. And that's probably part of what I find most exciting about where we are right now, is because we're before that. I enjoy I wish I would have lived in the era of, the 1980s. I was alive in the 1980s, but I was a child. I thought it would have been fun to be in the 1980s when the internet and computers are just, household computers are just kind of just coming into the popular zeitgeist. They're just now, starting to be adopted, because you see the people that adopted those things in the 1990s, the early 1990s, those computer nerds in 1991 are now the guys that are building rockets and sending people to Mars because they were ahead of this technological wave.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting to hear. And yes, it's true. I mean, you also mentioned the 1980s, but the downside of the 1980s is if you were into computers, you were considered a nerd, and it made you a social outcast. I mean, if you think about it, I can remember in the 80s, and I've seen this on multiple occasions, someone being punched because they were a nerd into the, by random strangers. Could you ever imagine going up to a woman in a train and punching her?
That's pretty horrible.
And people say, oh no, but it's not the same. It's exactly the same. People
Mm,
who were gamers, I remember seeing, because I was also one of them, people getting punched just for being a gamer, just for playing
that's
computer
ridiculous.
games. This is how much things have changed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's great. That's great that we've seen the change. But so it's like almost we have to pay even more homage to those early computer nerds, right? Because you guys blazed the trail for the rest of us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't really care that it was not cool. I mean, a lot. I actually, I was in a work meeting a couple of years ago, and one girl said, "Oh, you know what? It's so cool. All you nerds are so cool." And I said, "Oh, really? Okay. Like, why are we cool? Oh, I don't know, but isn't it the cool thing to be a nerd?" No, I'm just like,
It it really is. It
yeah.
really is.
And then
Well, it's because
I tried to explain then what I actually did in my work. She goes, "Oh, I don't care."
you're cool. I don't care what you do. You're just cool.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so okay, so you've written this book, right? Basically to explain to people why Bitcoin matters, and you're saying you've used examples of how computers in the and computing in the 80s and 90s um, were kind of like it was growing fast, but it wasn't at the point where it was at mainstream adoption. I mean, I guess with PC, it took PCs and iPads to get and mobile phones to get computing to real mass adoption,
Mhm.
and we're not there yet in crypto. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, and you see this, there's almost this exponential increase in how fast a technology can be adopted because it piggybacks itself off of the previous technologies
Mm,
that kind of came before it. So yeah, um, the internet and computing, it was something that it did take a while because yeah, you have to get all this hardware to people, right? So that they even have the ability to access the internet because without hardware, you don't have access to the internet. And so the cool thing about piggybacking ourselves off the internet though is that that hardware is already in our hands, right?
mm,
We're able to use the network effects of the internet because with a few strokes of a key I can go download an app and then also be integrated into the blockchain world, the greater blockchain world, just by downloading an app. So the infrastructure is already there. That's why we're seeing this kind of parabolic increase in
mm,
how fast technologies are adopted, and not even just in developed nations but in developing nations. You see there's all sorts of like South African or not South African, South American countries, African countries that they never had landline telephones and they never will. They just skipped straight to mobile technology, and that's enabled them to be plugged into the internet. So they a generation ago had no telephones, had no
mm,
telecommunications whatsoever, but now they're already adopting the blockchain, and they're actually adopting the blockchain at a faster pace
mm,
than we are in the United States because they have it for practical reasons, right? They need it for money remittance. If
mm,
a family member goes and works in, Great Britain and can make some good money and then they can send it back home, they're going to do that via Bitcoin, or they're going to do that via some other cryptocurrency where remittance fees are cheap, as opposed to sending it through something like Western Union that takes 25%. And so there's a financial incentive in this, not only an ease of use, right? Because they have the technology at their fingertips, but there's a financial incentive to do so. I think this was proven by El Salvador as well. El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as its national currency, like a lot of people know. And they have a lot of expatriates, people that work in different countries. And I want to say that I forget what the stat is, but they save something like it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars in remittance fees that they weren't paying. So if they were to send $100 paycheck home, they would pay $25 of that to whoever was sending that payment, Western Union or whoever. That $25 in El Salvador is a lot of money. And so they were just paying all this. I think it was something like 1% of their gross domestic product, their GDP for their whole country was remittance fees. It was something absurd. So imagine if you can add 1% back to your small country's economy just by adopting a technology. It's an absolute no-brainer. So it's really exciting, especially in those kind of smaller markets.
I think it's actually a lot more than 1%, because what I see is happening in these countries is the amount the amount of money it takes, the amount of people you have to employ to maintain your own currency is incredible. And so, and then to keep that currency volatile is even harder. So I actually think countries are probably saving 10 to 20% because they probably employ a lot of people to maintain their currency. So maybe it's 10%, but also I think that a lot of countries are just going to skip it and say, let's just use USDC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. And yeah, when all's said and done, you're right. The cost is probably something, if you could calculate all components of it, it is something big like that, some 10 to 20%. And I think, I don't know, have you ever heard of the dollar milkshake theory before? It's an economic theory.
Yeah, is this about the dollar that as it goes everywhere, it means it's actually kind of worth more and everyone dollarizes, something like that. Maybe you can explain it better.
Yeah, no. That you actually said, that's the gist of it. What it means is, the dollar is one of the most widespread currencies. The US dollar is one of the most widespread currencies in the world. But a lot of small nations still have their own sovereign currency. But it's not until, the US dollar is inflating. We're at like record high inflation in the United States right now, or like 40-year record high inflation. Other countries, smaller countries in particular, they're inflating much faster than the US dollar. So as weak as the US dollar is becoming, other countries, their currency is becoming even weaker. And so as those currencies collapse, they go into the US dollar. Those countries, adopt the US dollar, which in turn re-strengthens the US dollar a little bit. It's not enough to fix all the inflation problems that we're having, but it's enough to slow the inflation because there's basically more people and more demand for US dollars. And so, yes, while the trajectory of US dollars is, the US dollar has to collapse at some point. It's an unsustainable model. But it's extending the life of the dollar because of these other currencies. So the US dollar is essentially sucking up, drinking the milkshake of these other currencies as they go along. But the difference is countries like El Salvador. So El Salvador had a currency collapse, 10 years ago or something like that. They adopted the US dollar back then, but they, like we talked about, they recently also adopted Bitcoin as a side-by-side currency. So I think that's the battle you're going to see. Instead of currencies collapsing and then everybody just going over to the US dollar, there's going to be both. There's going to be, okay, we're going to adopt the US dollar because that's kind of seen as stable. Yes, it loses value over time, but from day to day, it's stable. But Bitcoin is going to be another option, because if you adopt the US dollar as your national currency, you're then beholden to all of the economic US policies. You're told how you can buy oil. You're told how you can get loans internationally and all sorts of things. But if you go on the Bitcoin standard, it gives your country a little bit more sovereignty over your own money. So Bitcoin's the only currency that these countries can adopt that's not their own currency, that allows them to remain sovereign. So there's a huge value proposition in adopting Bitcoin as a nation once your currency collapses. So that's the interesting thing.
I think there's a couple of things there. Like, I think one is that US dollars are getting stronger here in Europe. It's got stronger and stronger the last couple of months. It's over €1 actually. And the other one is, I think the thing that I think powerful about USDC and stable coins is I think people are going to adopt I think in the past, the difference is to adopt the dollar, they need, because the dollar, because a country would transact with with international banks, they would need the US and IMF's blessing. But I think the difference is now, if they use things like USDC, they don't need anyone's blessing. They can just do it without having permission now. And I think that's what's really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I remember when stablecoins came out, I thought, who wants a stablecoin? It's just for these people that are trading, and it's just, it's a tool for them. I really missed the boat on that. Stablecoins really have an important place in commerce today and commerce tomorrow as well. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. It changes the power dynamic with, in particular, like you said, the IMF, which is a very powerful organization.
Okay, another thing, like I do like the point you said that people would have, they could dollarize and also have like Bitcoin is a kind of, I don't know, maybe the savings account. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people say to me, will Bitcoin go to zero? And I always try to present the cases, and I say something in quantum computing could make the security obsolete. It's possible, but that can be overcome. Another one is another case. Tell me what you think of this. Is if there was a death spiral in mining where suddenly some amazing crypto came out and people started saying, oh, I'm not going to mine Bitcoin, I'm going to mine this other currency. What are the cases you see for Bitcoin collapsing? What are the possible ways it could happen?
Yeah, I think to me, it's very simple. Bitcoin, as long as it remains the most secure and decentralized blockchain, it will maintain dominance. There's kind of that like trinity in blockchains, right? So a really good blockchain needs to have decentralization, security, and speed. That's like the perfect blockchain. Bitcoin doesn't have speed. We know that. Maybe the Lightning Network. I use Lightning Network payments all the time. So I would actually say Bitcoin is very fast and very cheap, but the base protocol for Bitcoin is slow. And that's by design. It's part of its decentralization. That's part of its security. But if some component of Bitcoin, like you said, quantum computing, or there was a proper 51% attack on the network, then yeah, I think that would ruin a lot of the value proposition for Bitcoin. So I don't think a new entrant into the market, somebody that was really fast, because there are faster blockchains out there. There's a lot of, I use Solana for DeFi. Solana is really fast. It's really inexpensive, but it's been subjected to 51% attacks. It's had rug pulls on it. It's had all sorts of problems because it's not decentralized and it's not as secure. It's not nearly as secure as Bitcoin. And what you need in order to get to that level of decentralization that Bitcoin has is you need these incredible network effects. And we really haven't seen any kind of network effect, something that's grown to the scale of Bitcoin, become usurped in the past. For example, people like to think of Bitcoin as a company, and they say, well, why won't Bitcoin be surpassed like MySpace or Yahoo were by Facebook and Google? And I'd say, because you're thinking of those as companies. Bitcoin, because those are companies, but Bitcoin's not a company, it's a protocol. And so with the internet's protocols, it's protocols that are built on top of each other. And so to me, the simplest path forward is not to adopt a blockchain that's something different than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin already has this very pervasive network effect. It's all over the world. And so the most sensible thing is to stack other technologies on top of it, like Lightning Network and Liquid Network and some of these other things that help Bitcoin scale. But yeah, that would be my answer. If something were to upset Bitcoin or ruin the value proposition of Bitcoin, it would be a proper attack or a undoing of the cryptography, or like you said, quantum computing. But like you said, even quantum computing could be fought with more quantum computing. Quantum computing is very dangerous if only one party has that technology. But if quantum computing is a universal technology, then the miners could adopt that, and you would have to have these really, really complex nonces that, I don't know, for the average person that doesn't understand how Bitcoin mining works, every 10 minutes, you're essentially just trying to guess a number. And so the fastest computer is going to give you the fastest horse in the race. But if you can then match the computing power and try and guess that number as fast as the quantum computers, then essentially you have a fighting chance. So yeah, I think the security risks, what would ruin the value prop of Bitcoin.
It's actually quite interesting, because as Ethereum moves to proof of stake, a lot of those computers that are mining and securing Ethereum are going to switch to Bitcoin. So it should get even more secure. I mean, and talking about how like the speed, like the trifecta. I can't remember what the word was, but anyway, talking
I just
about
made up
that.
a word.
I mean,
I'm just kidding.
but the like you're right. It's like Lightning Network provides the speed. I mean, it's interesting because I'm in contact with a lot of people who Ethereum maxis and Bitcoin maxis and different altcoin maxi. Every alt chain seems to have its own maxis, and and then there's people who realize it's just a tech. And I've noticed that like these things like for scripting and smart contracts, Ethereum at the moment is clearly the winner. And I mean, you get smart contract platforms like RSK and Sovereign on Bitcoin. None of them have hit they're doing okay, but none of them have hit big time yet. And one of the things that was a bit disturbing, I've noticed that even though Lightning Network is being, the growth is incredible. It's just exploding and people don't realize it. But the problem is on top of that, like a lot of people, I was having a discussion recently with someone who was saying, "Oh, forget Ethereum, Bitcoin can do that. Just look at," and they told me like the name of a centralized company, which then sends transactions over the Lightning Network. And I was trying to explain that that's a centralized company, that you
Yeah.
can have Bitcoin and it can still be used centralized. For example, like for example, someone said to me, "Is it really 21 million Bitcoins in the world?" I said, If you keep your Bitcoins on a hardware wallet, it probably is only 21,000. But if you buy from the exchange, it's probably 35 million. Because when you
Yeah.
buy your Bitcoin, they don't have it. They just increase the database value by one. And they say you've got a Bitcoin and they'd lend your money to someone.
Yeah.
So there's
You're
probably
absolutely right.
35 million Bitcoins have been sold. And so people don't, I think that most people don't realize what is the role of these crypto and Bitcoin, and it's this trustless nature and the
Mm.
decentralization. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, um what do you like, where do you see Bitcoin and having it run things like smart contracts? Where do you think the future of that is? That's because, having used like Ethereum and Solana and smart contracts, Bitcoin still doesn't have a solid story there yet. And
Mhm.
Lightning Network, it's a transfer of value, but it's not the story yet.
Right.
Does that
Yeah, no,
question make sense?
that's it. No, that question makes perfect sense. And it's funny going back to what you said just a moment ago about the inflated supply because of people holding them. Yeah, that's the frustrating thing, is that because of a lack of education and people holding their crypto, currencies on exchanges, they don't realize that they're recreating the banking system. They're recreating fractional reserve banking, this concept where you inflate the value on paper as opposed to what it is in actuality. So that is something that it's one of the huge upsides of Bitcoin, is you can hold your money yourself, and you don't have to rely on these kind of shady, centralized companies that are going to do things that they've always done for generations and generations. So it's our chance to get away from it. But again, it's only if people understand that. And so that I do talk in the book about fractional reserve banking, the central banking systems. And so once people are made aware of those things, I think most people before that, they only put their Bitcoin on a hardware wallet because they were worried about it getting, the exchange becoming insolvent. But that's only part of the story. Yes, the exchange could become insolvent and you could lose your Bitcoin. But like you said, it's contributing to a problem. If you're keeping, say you own 3 Bitcoin, you're keeping them all on an exchange, that's probably telling the world that there's 9 Bitcoin, based on your 3 Bitcoin, or maybe even more like 30 Bitcoin. I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, we're helping contribute to the problem if we do that. But yeah, to your point about those things being built on Bitcoin, smart contracts and DeFi, I think that that's ultimately where it'll probably end up. And that's why I don't think, that's probably the biggest pushback I've gotten on my book, is that it's called Bitcoin Evangelism, and yet I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I think Bitcoin's primary. I think it's the number one. I think that it's the most important in terms of money, and I think money fixes a lot of things. If we can fix the financial system, then I think it fixes a lot of other components, but it doesn't fix everything. I think there's things like DeFi, there's things like even NFTs in their current form. There's definitely a hype market behind it, and there's definitely a speculative market behind NFTs. But the technology for securing intellectual property through things like NFTs, I think, has really big future implications. If those things, if NFT platforms, if DeFi platforms, if all of those things are just proving the use case of those things, Bitcoiners should be grateful that all that R&D, all that research and development is being done at the expense of all these altcoiners that are providing a market for it and providing technology for it. Because once that technology is robust and usable and scalable, then there's going to be a way to integrate that on the Bitcoin network, through second layer solutions or whatever it is. So it's like, you should applaud those people. Hey, I mean, and yes, I understand the frustration when you're looking at Bitcoin, you're like, hey, this is sound economic policy. And then somebody's buying, Shiba Inu because they're just hoping that it goes to the moon. I understand that that's frustrating when somebody doesn't understand the tech, but people, Ethereum developers, people that are building real technology, we should applaud them, because hopefully someday that makes all of our lives better, whether it's we're still using it on Ethereum or whether that gets integrated into Bitcoin. I think it'll ultimately get integrated, like we talked about, stacking things on top of Bitcoin, harnessing Bitcoin's network effect. I think that those things will eventually come back to Bitcoin. So yeah, I do agree that that's the best path forward, is that we should applaud those things and that technology.
Okay. Do you think that, you know, like, I don't know if you remember, like 20 years ago, people used to talk about maybe 25 years ago, people would talk about IP addresses to use the internet. Do you think in 10 years, people will even mention Bitcoin?
Hmm. I think so. I think the difference is because it's with an IP address, it's not something that has exchange value, right? And so it was very much underlying technology, which Bitcoin is very much an underlying technology. But Bitcoin's like, if you could own portions of TCP IP or something like that, like if you own some chunk of the protocol. And so I think
They
that
are
people,
valuable though. Like, if you look
sure.
25 years ago, an IP range which was like basically free of charge now
Mhm.
might be like a billion, like 100 million or $1 billion. So
Okay,
there is
I see what
value.
you're saying. Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. But as far as having markets for them, right? Like very easily access liquid markets and things like that, because IP addresses, ranges like that, there's the markets are very small and they're big companies that you're talking about, right? That are owning those. So yes, there is monetary value, and if you had them early, then yes, you could have made a killing off of them. But as far as like daily medium of exchange, I don't think they fit that category. And so I think Bitcoin will continue to be something, like you said earlier, that we keep in a savings account. If Lightning Network really does pick up adoption, then yes, we might even be using it as a daily currency. Who knows? I think that probably what's going to happen is some version of either CBDCs or central bank digital currencies, for those that don't know, or stable coins. I think that'll probably still be our primary medium of exchange. But yeah, the Bitcoin might be some of the background technology. But I think because of its sound money properties, I think Bitcoin will still be talked about. Some of these other protocols, Ethereum, same thing, you can own it and you can exchange it, but I think people might treat that just purely as a protocol. You'll interact with Ethereum coins as you need them, but you're going to be really using them for its properties because it's going to have such a broad appeal and it can do so many different things. You're going to use it more as a token in an arcade rather than a dollar in a savings account.
Okay. I guess, I mean, the reason I'm asking that is, well, when I'm doing my own project, I'm trying to predict to like 5, 10 years in the future and see
Mm,
how people will be acting, with regards to crypto. I mean, like, one of the things I see, like, going forward in time, is everyone, and including myself, talks about decentralization, and they say, yeah, we're going to have decentralized ID and stuff like that. But that's one thing I think will not be decentralized. I think governments will fight, tooth and nail,
mm,
to make sure that they still control your ID,
mm.
and which will ultimately have access to your wallets or whatever. And I guess where I'm trying to go with this is, what do you think is something that people don't expect will change because of Bitcoin and decentralization in 5 or 10 years in the future? Something people will say, no, that will never happen. Kind of like how 20 years ago people might have thought that Uber would be impossible, or other stuff like
Yeah.
that.
No, that's a great question, because yeah, I think that a lot of the things that we say that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are going to do, it just there's a, I think it's called Daytor's principle, that things about technology that you say right now that sound absurd, that doesn't mean that that's a reason to neglect the technology. Just because, if you were to say in 1990, oh yes, this technology that takes you 5 minutes to dial up so that you can access it from your desktop is going to someday summon you a car from your cell phone. That did sound absurd. And so, yeah, I think that's some of the difficulty is imagining these things. I think one of the things I put forward in the book is the integration of different technologies. For example, I talk about NFTs, and I don't personally own any NFTs, but I'm just trying to imagine, for example, NFT technology and how it integrates into other technologies. So, for example, if you go online maybe you're shopping in the metaverse or wherever it is, and you pick out, you find a pair of Nikes that you really like. Yeah, you might just buy them and order them and have them sent to your house. But I think that with the continued progress in 3D printing, I think it's totally feasible in 20 years from now, or even 15 years from now, that we just all have, like the same way that we have a microwave in our kitchen, we have a 3D printer in our office, or just like we have a regular printer in our office, we have a 3D printer in our office. I order the Nikes, I buy the NFT so that I can prove that I own that physical commodity, and then Nike gives me permission to print their, their intellectual property. They allow me to print their Nike shoe in my office. So I think that not only is it what are the future implementations of cryptocurrencies, but I think it's how do they integrate into other technologies. And so yeah, that's one that I think I actually feel fairly confident that that's something, and maybe it's not something like shoes, but there could be other things. Maybe I need a stapler, or maybe I need a fork or something like that, and I order my silverware and I print it in my office. Maybe it's simpler items like that, but I think that could be one way in which we integrate some of these technologies.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because that gave me a lot of like visual imagery. So what I started to think was then about token gating, and so basically you'd buy I can imagine even people buying the Nike token, not even having the shoe, going into a shop, and then they get an alert on their phone. It says this shop wants to know if you own the Nike token, and you say allow or disallow.
Yeah.
And you say allow, and and so you decide whether people can see what you have.
Mm-hmm.
And having the token might become more valuable than the shoe itself. And in
that,
fact,
that
not having the shoe might be the status symbol. To be,
that's a really
to
good
be like
point.
the billionaire guy who looks like a hobo.
Yeah, I don't even need the shoe. I'm so important. I don't even actually need the shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good twist to that. I think that's really important. That's a really cool thing. And yeah, I think going back to your point you made a minute ago about government IDs or our identification. I think that, yes, I think governments will try to find a way to hold on to our identity. I think one way that we will get privacy, though, is from companies. So our digital identity, I think we'll get a little bit of power of that back from the social media companies, or our, how we integrate into those. So I can probably have an online. So these Web3 wallets, your Ethereum wallet, if people haven't done that yet, if you're listening to the show and you haven't used an Ethereum wallet, or you haven't used a Solana wallet, go out and get an Ethereum wallet, MetaMask, or any of those, and then just go and find places, whether they're different exchanges that you can send or money, or get some crypto from and send it to and from, and then find an app that you can use a little bit of Ethereum to use. A Web3 wallet is really cool. It just hangs out on your browser, and it's almost like a passport. So instead of every website you go to, Web3 enabled websites, you don't have to have a new login and password for every website. You have this one passport. You have your MetaMask Ethereum wallet, and it's kind of like your one ID that goes from, Facebook's not Web3 enabled right now, but imagine all these websites are Web3 enabled. You could go from Facebook to Instagram to Twitter, then to Amazon, then you could go to another website, and you have one identity with one wallet that kind of unlocks all of those different websites and those different utilities to you, without having to have your own Facebook account and then your own Instagram account and your own Amazon account. You have one identity online, and you can obfuscate that identity. I can make it my name, Brian Demind, on there, or I can make my identity Satoshi Nakamoto. I can make it something completely different to anonymize myself a little bit. But I think that that's some of the value proposition of this as well, where, Bitcoiners, we don't have Web3 wallets yet. So that is some of the cool tech that you see with Ethereum, is having a Web3 wallet. And it's just this passport to the internet.
Talking about MetaMask, because when I first heard about Web3, I thought, and I played around with it, I thought, okay, because there was all these complicated things, there's these type of wallets, there's this type of transaction. I downloaded MetaMask, and then I was like, oh, that's what Web3 is. It's just MetaMask. What do you think is the chances of Microsoft and Google and Apple going to war and trying to basically like with the web browser in the 90s, and trying to basically implement MetaMask, but put their own take on it. And say, for example, Google trying to integrate it with Gmail. So if you have a Gmail account, you have a crypto account, and they say it's insured and everything, so that you can't get hacked. Do you think this will happen?
You're spot on 100%. I actually think Google's already doing that. Anytime I go to a new website and I haven't signed up for it yet, they say, do you want to just sign up with your Gmail? And so I can click a button and it signs up with my email address. And so my login is actually my Gmail account. So they're kind of doing that without the crypto component to it. And that's going to be the next step. That's how they're going to monetize it a little bit better. Because right now they're monetizing it through selling my data and stuff, but they're going to have a direct monetization because I think this is what they're going to do. They're going to say, hey, instead of having an identity on all these different sites, you just have this one Google identity, this Web3 wallet. And so we're the only ones that are going to control it. But like you said, we're going to insure it in case you get hacked or anything like that. That's going to be the value proposition of the Google wallet over the MetaMask wallet, is they're going to have some sort of insurance or some sort of extra protection. But here's the cool value proposition with MetaMask is that you can go to websites. You can use browsers like the Brave browser, and you can own your identity. So when you see an ad, if you even elect to see an ad, you can just say, oh, I don't want to look at ads. And I guess it begs the question, how does the ad revenue model work today? The way the ad revenue model works is I go to a website, they have ads all over the place, and then whoever owns the website gets the money for those ads. Okay, that's great. I came to their website. That's the way it works today. But if I go to a website with a Web3 wallet, I could say, no, I don't want to view ads, or I do want to view ads and give me 25 cents for every ad that I watch. And so you can actually, instead of the website getting that revenue, you could directly get paid for viewing ads. So you're kind of taking possession, or you're kind of taking the power of your identity back, because your identity has a monetary value to these companies. That's what Facebook does, right? That's how they make their money. That's how Google makes a ton of their money is through selling your data. You could now choose to sell your data, and you could choose how it's sold and which level of information, how much information you give about yourself, and how much you're comfortable with giving or not giving. But that's going to be the integration with Google and these companies. Facebook's going to do the same thing. All these different companies, they're going to say, let us be your one online identity. Because right now, Google only gets part of my identity. If they can get my identity for all of my social media, for all of my online commerce, my identity becomes 10 times more valuable tomorrow than it is today to them. So that is going to be the space race. You're 100% correct. And there's going to be all sorts of incentives. Google is going to say, hey, download the Google wallet. We've already got $100 in there for you. Facebook's going to say the same thing. Facebook's going to say, guess what? Not only that, it's going to give you access to all these new features on Facebook when you have our wallet as opposed to the Google wallet. So yeah, I think you're spot on.
Okay, so are you saying that instead of today, where you do a Google search and you might search for like cars where you live, and it sends, and it gets sponsored adverts at the top, are you saying instead maybe you just search, like whenever you do the search, you still get those ads, but also but how would that link back to you? Because with crypto, you would like need a way for companies to go to Google and say, could we sell to anyone who fits this profile? And that's kind of what happens with Facebook today. So they have to, are you saying that like maybe they could, like, this concept of soul-bound tokens?
No, I don't know that. Soulbound, no.
It's this kind of thing where I think it's basically where you get an NFT. I think it is, you get an NFT based on your interests or things that, you think describe you. And then, so if you have, like, for example, if you have a MetaMask, just by you having Bitcoin in your MetaMask, people can know something about you. And maybe by having Ethereum, they know something. But then it gets more specific. For example, if you have Mana or Axie Infinity coins, they know you're a gamer. Yeah. So soulbound tokens, I think, will take that to another extreme, if I'm describing them correctly, where your preferences, like maybe I like to wear Nike trainers. If I have that NFT, that all of these things describe me. So it means that Google would have to like maybe as you search, you would earn different tokens. Every time you do Google search, you get a token, and they use that to target you. But the only problem with that, of course, is that if they put that into your crypto wallet, then other people could use it as well.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting component. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a way for them to obfuscate maybe some of the coins in your wallet if they have control over your wallet. I'm sure there's a way that they can turn that off to the outside. But yeah, that's a really interesting. And yeah, I think that there's still going to be maybe some component of organic search on Google. But yeah, I pay for Google ads right now for my companies, and I think people are going to do the same thing. You're going to pay for Google ads as an advertiser, but some of that revenue, some of it or all of it, would go to the actual person viewing the ads. But you think about that value proposition as an advertiser. I'm now getting people for the first time ever asking to view my ads. So Google can go to advertisers and say, guess what? Not only are we forcing people to view your ads, because yeah, maybe I'm looking for a used truck, and then I get all these ads that pop up for all these used cars. I get used minivans and all these things. They're kind of giving, advertisers are paying, the people selling used minivans are paying to get those ads in front of me, but I don't care about those ads. They're not specific enough. I want a used truck, and maybe I have a particular year in mind or a particular model. So the advertisers, if I said, I'm clicking on this ad because I'm serious enough about it that I want to view it, as an advertiser, I want those people to be viewing my ads. And so, yes, I'm happy that the revenue is going to them. So yeah, Google can go back and say, hey, the person viewing the ad is going to get 90% of the revenue or 50% of the revenue. So now the viewer of the ad has some skin in the game. You as the advertiser, you're getting exactly who you want to view your ads. So I think it's kind of a win-win. Win-win-win is how it's going to be pitched to every party that's involved.
Oh yeah, of course, because that's a very interesting point actually. Because if you're viewing an ad, because up to now, it's like in the old days, you had PayPal, people could send money to each other. Then Stripe came along, and it made it easy for businesses to accept money. Because I know a lot of people saw Stripe and said, "Why is this worth $100 billion?" But it's just a nice form for accepting credit card payments.
Yeah.
And now with crypto, it could make it easy for a consumer to accept payments. So you could say, I'm interested in this and I'm happy for the company to phone me. This is my verified phone number. And for the privilege of them phoning me, I get like $5.
Yeah, right. Yeah, whatever your customer acquisition cost is, you're going to be able to justify it because this person just asked you to send them ads. I mean, it is a match made in heaven. And I'm actually already experimenting with this a little bit. And a lot of it's going to be micropayments. It might be something if me buying a truck, if I'm looking into buying a truck, they might pay me like something substantial, like $5 or $10 for an ad. But for a lot of ads, it's going to be a micropayment. And you can't do micropayments with fiat currency. We just don't, it doesn't make financial sense to send 1 penny to somebody or 5 cents to somebody. And so on Twitter, I've been doing a lot of promotion for my book on Twitter. And I've done simple things like retweet this post, share your Lightning wallet address, and I'm going to send you 50 Satoshis. 50 Satoshis is about a penny, but people, they love this idea of just getting compensated for it. Like all I got to do is comment in this thing and I get some Satoshis, or all I got to do. And so I get people, 30, 40 people sharing a post or retweeting a post. And I'm just sending them 50 Satoshis. And not only
is that via Lightning Network, by the way?
That's through, yeah, definitely. It has to be through Lightning Network. Because if you did that, because the fee, if I was doing that with just Bitcoin, the base protocol, the fee would be like 1,500 Satoshis to send 50 Satoshis. So it doesn't make sense.
I think that's what Zebedee's doing, isn't it? That's what Zebedee does.
I'm not familiar with that.
Because they're basically like just had a huge round and they're doing exactly that. I think streaming payments for gaming and stuff.
Yeah. Streaming payments is going to be huge. I think streaming payments both ways. Streaming payments to consumers is going to be big, but then even consumers paying to stream music or paying to stream their video or things like that. It gives another, it gives an interesting caveat to future commerce. And I think that's one of those things, like we talked about earlier. What does it look like 5 or 10 years from now? Paying a flat rate for a monthly Netflix subscription might not be the way things go. It might be that you just pay second by second these really small micropayments to view content, because it's like having your light switch on and off. You pay for it while you use it, and then you turn it off when you don't. Maybe, I don't know.
So yeah, it's interesting. So many ways we can go down with this. What about the Lightning Network? I know we mentioned it many times. Could you, because to me, I think the Lightning Network is kind of like Bitcoin was 12, 13 years ago. It's exploding and no one's really talking about it in the mainstream.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's going to have a moment of escape velocity where one big piece of adoption happens and then everybody's going to be aware of it. Or again, maybe it's not, maybe just more people will be using Bitcoin because all of a sudden it works. But yeah, the Lightning Network is just, for those that don't know, it's just a second layer. It's the next layer of Bitcoin. And instead of settling everything on the base layer of Bitcoin, you can send, party A and party B can send 1,000 transactions back and forth. And when they're done sending those 1,000 transactions back and forth, they just settle the final amount. So after 1,000 transactions, if guy A owes guy B $10, that's really all that gets recorded to the Bitcoin protocol. So 1,000 transactions can get batched together and then recorded as only one transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain. So if Bitcoin can only process 7 transactions per second, but each one of those transactions represents, say, 7,000 transactions or 1,000,000 transactions on the Lightning Network, you're vastly increasing the scalability of Bitcoin. So that's, for your viewers there, that's like the most dumbed down version of what the Lightning Network is. But I don't know if you followed the Bitcoin Miami conference and Jack Mallers from Strike. He talked about, he announced not only will Shopify be integrating Lightning payments, which I just got approved through Strike the other day to be one of their first people to accept Lightning payments through Shopify. So we're getting that set up as we speak. I'm really excited. So I'm in communication with
Alex Damko, is it?
I don't know him. I forget who it is from their
yeah, he's talking about it a lot. He's amazing how he talks about token gating and all this stuff.
Oh, really? I got it. What's his name? I'm gonna have to.
I think it's Alex Damko. I think
Stamko. Okay, I'm gonna listen to him, because that token gating you talked about earlier, I'm like, that actually makes a lot of sense, and I haven't really studied that very much. But one of the other things, not only will Shopify be accepting Lightning payments, they announced that NCR. So NCR in the United States is the biggest credit card merchant processor in the world. So if you go into a business and you swipe a credit card, there's a company in the middle of that called a merchant services company. And NCR, they do 1/6 of all the credit card transactions in the United States. Absolutely massive. They run all the credit card processing for Walmart, McDonald's, Chipotle, all these really big brands here in the United States. And they announced that they're going to be integrating with Strike by Q4 of this year. So you'll be able to go to Walmart, the world's biggest retailer, and you'll be able to there's going to have pay with Bitcoin signs. And supposedly, this is what the announcement was, that you're going to be able to pay with Bitcoin for whatever you're buying from McDonald's or whatever you're buying from Walmart. And Walmart is not going to hold Bitcoin. They haven't announced that they're going to hold Bitcoin, but what it's going to do is you're going to pay in Bitcoin, and then it's going to be a sale. They're going to transfer your Bitcoin into dollars. And that's how Walmart gets paid. But Lightning Network is enabling those payments, because you can't have people standing at the counter for 10 minutes waiting for their Bitcoin transaction to process. You need it to happen really fast. And here's the big kicker. Not only will this significantly reduce Walmart's fees, because my business, I have 3 locations for my stores, and we do like kind of therapeutic light treatments. Our 3 locations, we do like about $1.3 million in revenue per year. And we spend about $50,000 in merchant services fees every year. So just for the right to accept credit cards, we spend $50,000.
Wow.
Bitcoin Lightning payments are virtually free. My company could save $50,000 of bottom line profit just by adopting this technology. And here's the other thing, is that as a merchant, if I get paid with a credit card, the approval is immediate. So people think, oh, credit card payments are really fast because I swipe my card and it says approved. An approval and a settlement are 2 different things. As a merchant, as a company, if somebody buys something from me and they get an approval at the counter on Wednesday, I don't get paid until Friday. It takes 48 hours for that money to actually hit my account and settle. Bitcoin and Lightning, when the transaction is approved, it's settled at the same time. So Bitcoin is actually, even its current iteration in terms of settlement, is way faster for merchants. But here's the thing. Instead of Walmart having to sell something on Wednesday and waiting to get that money in their bank account by Friday, they get it instantly. So when they sell something on Wednesday, 3 seconds later, they have it in their account to spend. Now, a company like me, we have to, have an extra, $30,000 or $40,000 in cash just to float this process, because we're doing all these sales every day. And so we have to float. Okay, we're not going to get paid on this for 2 days. So we have to keep extra cash in our account for no other purpose than just floating this process. That's my company, my tiny little company. How much money Walmart, I go through this use case in the book, Walmart has to carry about $3 billion in extra cash at any given time just to float this process of slow payments. And so a great company like Walmart, a giant company like Walmart, what could they do with $3 billion? They could open a bunch of stores and make a whole lot more money. They're going to be saving tons of money. So when we talk about escape velocity, I think that's all it's going to take. If this really does happen and Walmart starts accepting and McDonald's starts accepting Bitcoin payments by the end of the year, not only is it going to show consumers that Bitcoin is for real and the Lightning Network is for real, but it's going to show businesses that you can save money and you can get paid a heck of a lot faster. And if that happens, I mean, we're talking about a game-changing thing in the next 12 months. So there's a lot of excitement around that.
I think it changes so much because, I mean, there's two sides to it. On the one hand, they can get paid faster. On the other hand, it's going to change the whole like Walmart supply relationship, because I know a lot of the large companies play games and they try and delay payments to suppliers like every 3 months and stuff like that. But even that whole relationship is going to start changing, because a lot of that could be that like with companies where you get paid instantly and they pay a third party, you'll probably see a lot more of that happen as well. It's just incredible what could change because of the Lightning Network. Okay, I think apart from the futuristic, well, this is also futuristic, but what do you think is a chance that like's happened in the past where the government basically said all gold is confiscated? Do you think there's a chance the US or other government could say we're going to confiscate any Bitcoin held by a citizen, and if they have it, they have to, forfeit it?
I mean, there's always a risk of that. I think that a country like China, you could definitely see something like that happening. And even them, as dictatorial as they are, as tyrannical as they are, top-down authorities they haven't even done that. They've banned mining, but they haven't even officially robbed their citizens of their Bitcoin. So I think that's probably a good sign. I think part of it's because it would undermine their power if they tried to do that. I think China's almost afraid of making an edict or a law saying, hey, we're going to take your Bitcoin, because if they're not able to do that effectively, then it's going to make them look really kind of wimpy. So I think they're I think they're aware that that would be a very difficult thing to do. Even with all of their artificial intelligence and all of their surveillance on their population, I still think it would be very difficult, because it's so easy to anonymize your Bitcoin wallet. It's so easy to store your keys in your head and have no record of it anywhere else. But particularly in the United States, particularly in the UK, I don't think we're at risk of that, because there's so many legislators that are proponents of Bitcoin, that are proponents of cryptocurrency. And I think you can only count on people's greed and self-interest. And that's kind of the nice thing about this, is there's a lot of politicians that are invested in cryptocurrencies already, or that are being lobbied by cryptocurrency companies. And so there's almost a financial incentive for positive laws to be made, positive regulation to be made. So that doesn't mean that it's going to be sunshine and rainbows from here on out. I think governments will push back, but an out and out ban, I don't think is likely. It is certainly always possible. And so I think that we need to be vigilant about that. And we need to make sure that we're kind of like what you and I are doing, educating people on why this matters, why this empowers everybody, and why a fair monetary system is good for everybody. If you're for the poor and downtrodden, why connecting to the worldwide economy through Bitcoin and payments is good for those people. If you're rich and powerful, why a fair and open monetary network is still good for you too. And so I think helping people understand that and educating them on this technology is really important. It's going to help maybe remedy some of those really kind of nasty things that people are worried about that could happen.
Okay. What do you think about, I know it might seem like I'm asking random questions here, but it's all like there's a thread somewhere. What do you think about inflation? Is it temporary or what do you think? Because I haven't read your book yet, but what do you think, where is it going?
Yeah. I think that I have no doubt. And I reserve that I could be wrong, but in my mind, based on historical precedent, there's a 100% probability that the US dollar or any nation that has the power to take on debt and then also has the power to print their own currency. There's a 100% historical precedent of those countries going into hyperinflation. And so I think the US dollar ultimately crashes. I think we might still call it the US dollar, whatever comes after our current US dollar. We've done that in the past. People think we've had one US dollar. We've had like 4 iterations of the US dollar. The US dollar that exists today isn't the same one that existed in 1970. It's not the same one that existed in 1912. We've had different versions of the US dollar. It looks the same. People treat it the same, but the policy behind it, the metrics behind it, are completely different. So we've actually had the dollar change over the years. But the reason why I say that is you have to think, if we're like playing chess and I'm trying to anticipate what my opponent's moves are, I'm looking ahead and I'm thinking, why are they picking this strategy? Governments, when they get to the point of where the US is right now, where we have an insurmountable debt, we have an over $30 trillion debt. No amount of budgeting is going to ever pay that off. Even if we balance the budget, it would take 100 years to pay off that, even with fiscal responsibility, which neither one of our political parties here is trying to be fiscally responsible. It's politically untenable. So there's 3 possibilities, and I lay this out in the book. There's austerity, which austerity is what I talked about. It's balancing the budget, becoming fiscally responsible. If you do that, you're going to cause a depression. It really will. We have so many social safety nets that you're going to have to cut back spending on that, and people are going to get hurt. It's going to be very politically unpopular. And if you try to balance the budget and you hurt people and you cause a depression, guess what? You're not going to get voted back in 2 years or in 4 years. And so the next guy, the way he's going to win the election is by promising to undo everything you just did. So no policy is going to balance the budget for 100 years, or no politician is going to be able to balance the budget for 100 years. The next one is default. The country could just choose to default on our $30 trillion. And now China owns, a couple $1 trillion of debt. So I could see some Americans saying, okay, let's just default on the Chinese debt because they're our economic enemy. And we'll just say, screw them, like that, whatever. Well, guess what? The other 28 trillion of that debt, we can't default on, because most people that hold that debt are US citizens. They're people that hold US Treasury bonds and things like that. So if we were to default on our debt and say, we're just not going to pay our debt, or we're only going to pay 50 cents of the dollar on all of our debt, Americans going into retirement are going to get crushed. I mean, you're going to have a whole generation of senior citizens that are poor. And so then that's going to cause its own economic problem. And again, what's going to happen is the next politician is going to say, oh, we're going to undo this default and we're going to take care of the old people. So that leads us to conclusion number 3. It's the only option you can do that's politically tenable. And it's the only option that any country has ever done when they get in this position, because everybody likes the politician that's doing this. You just continue to spend because it continues to kick the can down the road until you have a hyperinflation currency crisis. But what you do is the third thing is, how do you make $30 trillion of debt not that significant? You hyperinflate the currency, or I don't think they want hyperinflation. They think that they can play this game of just high inflation. If they can make the debt 8.5% cheaper every year, eventually you get to the point where you can actually pay that down. So even if you're taking on nominally more debt, you can get it to the point where you're inflating the value of the currency so fast that you get this delta where it actually becomes reasonable to pay it off. What happens though, it always creates this hyperinflationary spiral. And so the one of the use cases or the historical cases I talk about in the book is Weimar Germany, because a lot of people are familiar with Weimar Germany after World War I. They had a 60 billion mark debt, which was pretty equivalent to like the $30 trillion dollar debt that we have today. The 30 billion, or excuse me, the 60 billion mark debt that Germany had after World War I, it was because of war reparations and funding the war and all the economic calamity that they had. They had this huge debt. And in a 4-year period, so from the time the war ended to 4 years later, their 60 billion mark debt became so insignificant. The currency had inflated so much that their smallest unit of currency, so like our dollar is like our smallest unit of currency, their smallest bill that they had was a 1 trillion mark note. And so when your smallest unit of currency is 1 trillion marks and your national debt is 60 billion, it means that you turned your national debt into the equivalent of 60 cents. When I read that, I had to read it from other sources because it seems so absurd, but they literally turned a national debt into the value of 60 cents. And so, yes, it caused economic calamity, but dealing with a hyperinflation and the bust of your currency and then creating a new system is actually a lot less painful than going through 100 years of paying down a significant debt. So if we're looking at what are the central banks and our federal governments, what are their incentives to do this? The writing's on the wall. This has happened 100% of the time. Again, when a country can take on debt and when they can print the currency in which the debt is denominated in.
But it's a four. I mean, that's so incredible to hear that all of those options is a fourth possible option that they make a CDBC, and when they have economic problems, they just start taking money back.
That yes, and I think that that's an option. So rather than just taking money back, I think what they'll do, because one of the factors in inflation, it's not just the supply of money, because we saw the money supply because of COVID spike like crazy in 2020. But at that time, people were still nervous and they weren't spending it. The velocity of money is also really important in inflation. So if people have a lot of money, that doesn't cause inflation. It's once they start spending it at a very fast rate. And so CBDCs will have the ability for governments to say, okay, you only have $50 to spend today, or you only have 50 pounds to spend today. So we're going to slow the velocity of money so that we don't create too much inflation. So I think governments, that's why they think that they're going to be able to play this tight wire rope walk this time. They say, okay, in the history of currencies, yes, we've always hyperinflated and we've always had a currency bust, but we're going to have this technological revolution of CBDCs. And so that's going to help us combat hyperinflation. So yes, we're going to get inflation, but we're not going to get it to hyperinflation because CBDCs, yes, we could take back money, but if they take back money, if they just take $100 out of your account or $1,000 out of your account, that goes back to this politically untenable thing. The politicians that are doing that are going to get voted out, and then the next guy is going to run on the promise to not take money out of your account. So I think that if the election systems are fair and equitable, then I think that won't happen. But that is a possible option. I think that is very possible. One of the interesting things that I didn't state earlier is how Weimar Germany fixed their hyperinflation. A lot of people didn't know this, but they had the Reichmark, which was the currency that was hyperinflating. And then what they did was they didn't make anybody use it, but they had a new currency come out called the Rentenmark. And they said, we promise we're only going to print, and I forget what the supply was, but we'll call it 100 billion. We're not going to print more than 100 billion Rentenmarks. And so this currency is going to have a fixed supply. This one, you can keep using it, but it's losing value every day. This one has a fixed supply, and that people just naturally gravitate over to the fixed supply one, and then it stabilized the currency. So the Rentenmark, the new stable currency, even though, Bitcoin is exactly that. It's written into the code to be scarce and stable. So while people think of Bitcoin as volatile today, in a hyperinflationary crisis, it's going to be the most stable currency out there. And you see this. Zimbabwe was a famous use case. Their currency hyperinflated, and then a lot of their people went over to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, as volatile as it is, it was still way more stable than their national currency. So anyways, that was just an interesting tidbit on that German hyperinflation.
I like to think that the US will make sound monetary decisions, but when I see how the Democrats and the Republicans fight sometimes over trivial issues, you know, like I'd like to think that they have a big conspiracy theory, a grand scheme, but sometimes when I look at the incompetence, I'm like, is there a chance that America just falls by the wayside and some country in Africa just basically, you know, which is totally crypto native, just basically becomes a superpower? Is it a chance?
I think so. I mean, I think that there's a chance, right? There's a lot of things that are going against that. The U.S. has so much infrastructure, right? We have so much military power, and we have a lot of technological innovation in different sectors. So I think there would be a lot of unwinding, but I think that money is the most important component. So if the U.S. loses its stranglehold over worldwide monetary policy, I think you're right. I think that there could be somebody that just comes out of nowhere and challenges the U.S. in terms of monetary power, or just, because African countries have a ton of resources, right? That's why Africa has always been so oppressed, is because outside powers have always come to drain it of its resources. If they somehow got control over their money and said, no, now we're going to control our resources, you're right. They could be a big player on the world stage.
I mean, yeah, I hear from people who've been to Nigeria, and they say they're basically like your man on the street understands crypto better than most US lawmakers.
Wow.
Because they actually have a use case for it, and I'm starting to hear the same from India as well. Okay.
And sorry, just real quick, I do have a hard out in about 5 minutes. I'm sorry to throw that on
I was going to say we're kind of at the end now. So
okay.
What is would you like to, for the purpose of the audio listeners, audio only listeners, would you like to share where people can find you and any links? Because then we can close up.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. And I appreciate your audience, and I appreciate your platform. It's so helpful to have a dialogue like this, because I mean, I came in getting to share about my book, and I'm learning from you about some stuff that I need to go out and research. So I appreciate that. And that's what's so great about this community, is that we're just constantly kind of sharpening one another. But as far as links, the easiest way to find me and to communicate with me is just through Twitter. If you're on Twitter, it's my handle is at Brian, Brian, THE Mint, MINT, or I'm also on Instagram. It's at Brian, BRIAN .Demind, DEMINT. My book is on Amazon. If you want to buy an audio book. Oh yeah. Thank you. I forgot. I got it right here. So Bitcoin Evangelism. It's on Amazon. There's an ebook available. We're working on the audiobook right now. So most of my friends that haven't read it, they say, as soon as you have the audiobook, I'm going to listen to it. So we have the audiobook in production, but we have the physical copies and the ebook. That's all available on Amazon. And one of the neat things about this is that I actually hid a Bitcoin wallet with 3.1 million Satoshis in it. So it's about $700 worth of Bitcoin. I hid the 12-word seed phrase throughout the book. There's a page in the book that explains it. So if you read through the book, you can do a little Easter egg hunt, and nobody's found it yet. We've had the book out for about a month now, and nobody's found the wallet. My kids, I have a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old that are all looking for the wallet.
I'll
through
try
the book.
and find
And
it.
so, it's pretty fun. So
you give a clue.
Anyways.
You give clues as to how to find it.
So on my Twitter, I do. That's one of the pages in the book that explains kind of how it works. It does say, go to my Twitter, at my top tweet I have pinned. It gives you the first word. It tells you how to find the first word and kind of what to look for. So it's been fun. And so people have been enjoying it. I think that people have messaged me, kind of as they find words. I think people have, found like 6 or 7 of the 12 words. So nobody's found all of them yet. But yeah, it's been cool.
All right. That sounds good. It was so interesting. I could listen to you for hours. So I'd like you to come back on another time on the podcast, but thanks for your time today, Brian. It was fantastic.
Seriously, I would love to, yeah, you're so much fun to talk to. Likewise, I think we would just, I mean, we were already talking off air, so we could have done this for even longer. So thank you so much. Yeah, you're a blast to talk to, and pray for all the success for your podcast, and just, keep going strong. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.